That's right, JKL, sponsored by Telkom. Telkom, moving with you. In the studio, Willis Otieno, Elias Mutuma, Kamothawai Ganjo, all of them, lawyers, all of them talking law stuff. It's deep, but you know we're trying to get a way forward, okay? We're trying to find a way forward out of this morass, if you will. But we're making headway, and I think, we have to go through this. And my question is, gentlemen, if we go beyond the 60-day window that the Supreme Court insisted we have to have an election in 60 days, will the president still be the president beyond 60 days? Come on.
There are many things that the Constitution does not answer. One of them is what happens after the 60 days. But there's also some things that the Constitution is very clear, that the president serves his term from when he's sworn in to the time when the next president is sworn in. That there is no confusion. Now, what happens after 60 days may be questionable in other respects, but with regard to the person of the president, and I suppose then the deputy president, and because also the cabinet continues to serve until a new one is appointed, one assumes that government will continue to function, subject only to any limitations that may be there in the Constitution. But I don't think that there is that substantive lacuna that would then go to the conversations that people hear about caretaker. And I don't think, unless of course people went to court and the court made a declaration of some nature, the Constitution, I think, on that point is clear.
Elias, do you agree with that? There won't be any crisis?
No. Elections are done in three parts. Number one, we have the first election, which is anchored in the Constitution on the second Tuesday of August after every 5 years. That's what we had on 8th of August 2017. In the event that that election is nullified, then you go back to elections within 60 days. That would mean if we hold any elections after 60 days, they are not constitutional. They are not recognized under the Constitution. And there comes in now the crisis that, and when you talk about crisis, we talk about a situation which has not been provided for by the Constitution. Now, to echo the sentiments of my senior here, as to whether we have a president or not, the Constitution is clear. I mean, he continues to enjoy incumbency powers as long as the process of looking for another president is on course.
No matter how long it takes.
But now, the issue is, should we hold elections? Are they constitutional after 60 days? So someone might challenge those elections if they are held beyond the 60th day. But as to the powers of the president, that is clear. The Constitution is clear.
Yeah. And that is the danger, Jeff, of the conversation about pushing elections beyond 60 days. Because then we get into an environment which the Constitution does not address, which means we may then not be able to come out of it. So whereas we may talk about the presidency, the reality is that the country is much bigger than just the presidency. Yeah. The question is, when we hold the elections the next time, what will be the effect of those elections? And so it is important, and let's remember, we're still a very young democracy. We're not a perfect democracy. We're trying to build ourselves into a constitutional democracy. It is important to build on what we have rather than finish it. You remember that when the Supreme Court made the decision, I was one of those people in this studio who said, I'm proud of the Supreme Court. I may not agree with it, but I'm proud of it as an institution, because what it is saying is that this country is a country of institutions, and that sometimes we will not agree with those institutions, but we must support them. My fear of the NASA position is that it wants to actually bastardize institutions. That's my fear. Even if they are right, I don't think the solution for this country is to put institutions aside, because when the crisis happens, where do we go? Where does everyone else go? So I'm saying, let us recognize that we are not in a perfect environment. Let us recognize our institutions, including IEBC, will make mistakes. What is it that we can do to continue to build? Because we cannot afford the void that we may go into, which may be more dangerous than the crisis we're talking about. That really is my fear.
Let me talk on the question that is said that why NASA is bastardizing institutions. I think it is quite unfortunate that when you positively criticize, you seek to engage an institution or the people in that institution, that is say that you're trying to undermine those institutions. IEBC, for all that we know, the highest court in the land has made an adverse finding against its processes. Prudence will expect that the same commission will, in fact, even before we go there, they will do their own introspection and try to find out where did they go wrong. Have they done an introspection? There was an attempt to do an introspection by IEBC, and the chairman, through a memo which was made public, actually pointed out some of the issues which NASA had raised before, and even named names.
Yeah. You talk about Chebukati.
Chebukati, the chairman of IEBC.
Who was not found to be culpable.
No, not found. Listen, in the Supreme Court, let me clarify this. In the Supreme Court, the pleadings and the prayers in court did not seek to adversely mention any individual. But the processes which were being questioned, processes are manned by persons, by human beings.
Yeah.
So if you flash a process that was found to be regular or to be legal, there was definitely somebody behind it. Chebukati, in his own motion, without us, did his own introspection and maybe his own internal investigations, and fingered certain individuals within the commission, and he proposed action against them. His own internal memo, as we sit right here, Chebukati's memorandum, and the people he was pointing out to have been responsible for some of those irregularities and illegalities have not been acted on. Nothing has happened. It's as if that memo never took place. But that is why we are saying we trust IEBC as a body corporate. But we do not trust some of the individuals therein. And these individuals are persons who even the chairman himself, in an internal process,
enough for you to withdraw from an election.
Enough for us, because what they did led to a Supreme Court of Kenya nullifying the entire election. So why, let me ask you, it is not proper to do the same thing using the same formula and you expect different results. If IEBC had internally reviewed its own systems, identified what were the mistakes that were made in the last election, and then made appropriate changes, we will not even have needed to go to them. They've not done that.
Let me say this, Jeff. You know, again, and I'll keep making this point. We have institutions, we have processes for a reason. If NASA believed that there were certain individuals, because they said they have the evidence, that there are certain individuals who are culpable. Remember that the election court, the Supreme Court sitting as an election court, is actually allowed, is permitted by law to make a finding of culpability and then direct the DPP to do something. The responsibility they had on the country is to actually produce that evidence so that the court then would be directing the DPP in respect of specific individuals to leave, no, let me just finish, to leave that process which is provided for in law, but instead go to the streets. So the issue for me is not whether or not you're entitled to go to the streets. Peaceful demonstration is part of our constitutional right. But what I'm saying, we're building a democracy. Let us ensure that the processes that are there, we start there. They cannot be the alternative. Number two, on the question, for example, and that's why I don't like discussing matters when people are not there. The question of the memo by Chebukati, because I watched the CEO here. He said, look, we responded to those issues to the satisfaction of the commission. Now, if we sit here and assume that those were facts and so therefore there's culpability, it's also not fair on those individuals. Because remember, if we believe in the fair Article 47, and you're a lawyer, you're a constitutional lawyer who believes in constitutional rights. If you believe in the fair and due process, surely when an accusation is made against somebody, we cannot conclude that they are culpable. Remember that the Supreme Court said that these problems were systemic, which means you may not, the fact that errors happen doesn't mean there's an individual who was doing that with a purpose. Mistakes happen in institutions. For example, Form 34 is the one that were not signed. They were signed by returning officers, not by Chiloba. You know, if you know, so what we are saying is that if we want to be fair and reasonable, let us follow due process for everybody. It cannot be that the law, we want fairness, fair administrative action on ourselves, but you don't want that on other people. It is also not reasonable.
Let me say this. Let me say this. This point is very clear. We have said, and in fact, let me use the simple example Kamoda has used of the forms. I was at the Milimani Law Court scrutinizing those forms overnight, and I will tell you this. Some of those forms, even if I brought them here, one form I remember for Wajir East was an A4 photocopy paper that someone used to declare the results. At face value, that is an election offense. Now, we've done a comprehensive report to the DPP. We only had 14 days, in fact 7 days, within which to file our petition. A very short time. So that when we went to the Supreme Court, we were focused on overturning that declaration.
Okay, Willis,
but let me finish. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. Wait, I finish. Let me finish. Then you can ask.
Yes.
We went to court to overturn that election. After which, we've gone to the DPP and made a report.
Yes.
on investigations on persons who, in our view, should be culpable.
Right.
IEBC on its own, the chairman on its own motion, has also pointed out some people who he feels there's an issue with. Now, in fact, we are not even saying that these people should be dragged from IEBC straight to prison. We are not saying that. We are simply saying because an adverse report has been made about a process that they were involved in. Fairness to me, as a contender, will require that you step aside. And President Uhuru Kenyatta, let me finish. And President Uhuru Kenyatta, in an address to the State of the Nation address to the National Assembly, to the Parliament, did at some point name certain ministers, certain public officers, who he said there are adverse reports that are linking them to certain...
In fact, that's what I was going to say.
Let me just finish. Because there were adverse reports.
By whom?
I'm coming to that. There were adverse reports on them, and he said, kindly, just hold fort. I mean, step aside for now. Let investigations be done. Now, NASA is a principal player in this coming election.
Yes.
We've expressed our reservations on certain processes, which the Supreme Court agreed with us. IBC chairman, the principal returning officer for the presidential election, has equally raised some of those questions. So, for the question of fairness to all players, we are simply saying, even if they're not taken to jail now, because they must go through the due process of the law, why must they insist that they are the ones who must still oversee the election process? And my last word on that is this.
Jeff,
it is akin, let me just finish, it's akin to a bus driver who causes an accident through reckless driving, and when the ambulance comes to carry the victims to hospital, he insists in his drunken stupor that I'm the one who must still drive this ambulance with the victims to hospital.
Willis,
can't happen.
You know, again, I will keep this until they say until the cows come home. You have said here, you have reported the matter to the DPP.
Yes.
But even as the DPP is continuing investigations, you want to enforce what you believe is your version of justice by rioting every day.
We are not rioting. Article 37 allows us to picket and demonstrate.
Demonstrating,
does it
those
stop
people
us?
can go. No, of course not, and I respect that. What I am saying, you're saying, despite the fact that you have institutions, you don't believe in them.
We believe. That's why we reported.
No, if you did, you wouldn't be demonstrating for them to go home. What you'd actually be demonstrating maybe for DPP to finish investigation.
No.
But instead, what you are saying is, even though that conclusion has not been made, from where you see those people are culpable, they must go home.
We've not even said they go home. I simply said, for the purposes of this fresh election, these people can even be deployed to become returning officers. I mean, to become logistics officers in some.
You just want them out of
headquarters. They cannot be part, not out of headquarters. They cannot be part of what we call the elections administration for the fresh election.
Purely because of
serious allegations.
Yeah, but you see serious allegations.
Yes,
serious
in
allegations
elections
by who?
An election officer must be beyond.
Let me show you how you're not consistent. For example, there are errors even by specific commissioners themselves on the record, including the form that was was the basis of the announcement by the presidential election that you foresee. I have never heard you people saying.
Let me respond.
Let me finish.
I will respond to that one when you finish.
Because the law is the law, and I know people talk about, oh, there's a constitutional problem. If someone breaks the law, if someone is a thief and you believe they are a thief, you don't say, oh, but you know there will be a... You say they must be dealt with.
Let me respond. I like what you've said. I like what you've said.
Yeah.
The person who was in charge of receiving and tabulating all those forms is number 2 or number 3 on our list of persons who we feel should not play any role.
Oh, so he's on your list as well?
He's on our list. The person, the person who was making those forms is
let me change the subject real quick and ask Elias. Is the IEBC going to be able to gazette your candidate, and I'm sure the other 7 or 6 or 7, in 14 days?
Well, it's not an issue of being able.
It should be 21. We don't have 21 days.
Thank you.
It's not an issue of being able. And Mativo was, alive to that fact. He said you can either do a fresh gazettement or you can amend. If you amend, you do not require the 21 days. So I think that's the rider that he
and the commission has announced that what they're going to do is do a corrigenda, which means they're just going to attach it to the first notice. Now, again, we can argue as to whether that's right or wrong. We can argue as to whether that's right or wrong. But at the end of the day, let that issue be determined by the responsible institutions. If they have got it wrong, that is why the courts exist. Let's go challenge it.
Okay.
Yeah. A corrigenda on the question of dates when things take effect. A late corrigenda cannot cure a time frame. A corrigenda can cure, for example, a misspelling of names.
What is a correction?
Misalignment. It is meant to rectify.
Man,
It's an amendment.
That's Greek, man.
It's an amendment.
To amend, but so that what you are amending, you are not amending the substance of the dates. But so that the notice of 21 days.
It doesn't have to be 21.
No. It must be. Section 14 obligates that whenever a presidential election is supposed to be held, there must be at least a 21-day notice.
Even if it's an...
that is not in the context that we are in.
Yes.
It is in the context of the fresh election, the first election. But if you're doing this pursuant to a court decision, then you must follow the court decision. And the court decision said, we are aware that, number one, it may not be possible for you to do this within 21 days. That's why it gave, even without us asking the court, you can actually do an amendment to the original gazette to include the name of Ekuru Court.
Do any of you gentlemen, or can you answer the question, will we have an election on the 26th? I still don't have an answer. Will we have an election on the 26th
Let me
of
speak
October?
on behalf of Ekuru Court.
Yes.
Where it stands from, we have an election on... yesterday we didn't know whether we're going to have an election. Pursuant to today's judgment, we'll have an election on 26th of October 2017.
I would believe so too. There will be challenges, there's no doubt. But I think we must have an election on the 26th. I think this country cannot afford the uncertainty that is expensive, not just on politicians, but on everybody else, by us not having an election. Is it going to be perfect? No. Are we a perfect country? Of course not. Should we ensure that the IEBC, to the fullest extent possible, complies with the Constitution and the law? To the extent that we can, whatever it takes. But we must do what it can, whatever we can, to ensure there's an election on the 26th. Whoever will have a problem with that election, institutions still exist. The institutions are not being folded up. We'll still go back to court, and the court will give directions as necessary. We cannot leave this country at the mercy purely of partisan politics, because that is where we are headed.
And let me say this, Jeff, before you go to Willis.
Yes.
As a voter now, as a Kenyan, let's not assume that we do not have options. Let's not be our own prisoners. I mean, we have options. It's only that we are so much inclined to, NASA and Jubilee. We have other options out of this. Why should we just, stick to these people who have caused all these problems? Number one, you look at Jubilee and NASA. Allow me to say this. The current election laws that we have today that are being amended by Parliament were actually enacted by NASA and Jubilee.
NASA was not in place when those laws were being enacted.
It was Jubilee in another name. It was ODM. They were enacted by NASA and Jubilee outside Parliament, and the parliamentarians were told to pass these laws without adding a comma or even removing a full stop. Now we have NASA on the streets trying to reform the IBC that they created. We have Jubilee in Parliament trying, to amend the laws that they created. Why do we still trust these people? We have an option.
That is called a pitch.
The question which you asked is this. And
October 26th.
And I am guided by a decision of our Supreme Court.
Actually, I was going to ask you a different way, but just go ahead.
In petition number 1 of 2017, the Supreme Court was very clear that an election is not an event. An election is a process. I'm an election expert, ordinarily. And I will tell you, the process leading up to the polling, the election process, must be so meticulously done that the outcome should be less contentious. But the process we are going through right now, it is so impeached that if you look at the provisions of our Constitution on the principles of the electoral system, the standards which our elections must meet as per our Constitution, the standards are prescribed in our Elections Acts and the regulations therein. I am sorry to say that this process is so impeached that on the 26th, the only thing that you can have is not an election, but polling. Is it possible to get a ballot box and put it in some polling station and then people cast? Polling can take place. But will that qualify to be an election as defined and recognized by our Supreme Court and guided by our Constitution? In my respectful view, we will not have an election on the 26th of October,
but we'll have
2017. We may have a poll.
Okay.
But the gist of it is this: the Supreme Court, even the High Court in their case, have all ordered for an election. Okay. So the nutshell of it is that we will not have an election.
And an election or a poll without NASA?
Without
NASA.
Our position we've made it very clear there will be no elections. There will be no elections in this country.
I think NANSA is entitled to that view, and I think it's a legitimate view. Unfortunately, I don't think they're the final determinants for what an election is. The institutions that answer that question. So I think every party must do what it needs to do as it considers its constitutional obligation. Then, after the 26th, we will come back to the same institutions, and they'll say whether there was an election that met the constitutional principles or there were none. I don't think it can be on one party to determine that question to finality. Yeah. That is an opinion, which is a legitimate opinion. Sure. But that issue will be tested by other institutions. What we must all commit to is to respect those institutions, including, by the way, Jubilee. You know, I mean, it is not like Jubilee itself is innocent in terms of attacking and trying to whatever institutions. It also is sometimes guilty of the same thing. We must also commit ourselves that when institutions make decisions, we abide by those decisions. Or we'll put away the constitution, put away the rule of law, and go to mobocracy. That cannot be good for this country.
This thing we keep mentioning mobocracy. Let me say this. And my senior Kamodo keeps mentioning that we must respect institutions. And for me, the greatest institution I respect are the people of Kenya, who in Article 1 of the Constitution are the sovereign. The same people of Kenya have given unto themselves the power to demonstrate and to picket on any issue. So that right now, the people of Kenya, those who are aligned to the NASA coalition, are picketing and demonstrating and presenting public petitions on the questions of elections reforms.
Yeah.
Now that is allowed. In fact, I was expecting my colleague to say that they should urge the Inspector General of Police to provide us with adequate security.
In fact, I'll say that for his sake, adequate security, because I'm a believer in
that. And
to
protect us from attacks by marauding businessmen in the city.
Or people who are demonstrating pursuant to their constitutional rights, and who are protecting the rights of other people, because also it's not like the right to picket is also an absolute right. It's also a right that ends where somebody else's right starts. Sure. The police have a responsibility, in fact a constitutional duty, to protect them, to ensure they carry out their peaceful processions, to ensure they are able to accomplish that which they're accomplishing. The problem is when we get to the point where that evolves. And let me tell you, in a country like this, where you have a lot of people also who are struggling at a financial, at an economic level, you must expect that there will be opportunities for those demonstrations to be hijacked, either deliberately or just because of that nature. We don't know. The police have a responsibility to do that. But at the end of the day, the police also have a responsibility to protect law and order for the benefit of those who get caught in between and who are just going on about their business. So in between there, let us respect each other's rights. I would be the greatest supporter, and I will continue to be the greatest supporter of every person in NASA being able to demonstrate every day, even though I don't agree with their
All right, gentlemen, let's get some tweets, because this is a live show and we're in real time. Let's get some reactions from folks out there. Monica, what do we have first? Is it tweets? All right. First one up. A question to Willis. This is Salah. A question to Willis. How will the new nominations resolve NASA's irreducible minimums?
Very simple. The same question. You cannot conduct elections without setting up a proper electoral environment that will allow everybody to fairly compete. Yes.
Okay, next. John Mutiso, our court has his own irreducible demands. His include Chebukati and Chiloba must go before elections. Is that true, Elias?
No, that's not what he said. He said that he has issues that he needs addressed by IBC. Not demands, but issues that needs to be put on the table and addressed. Period. Not demands.
Not demands.
Yes.
He's just happy to be included, is that it?
He's happy to be included, but of course there are issues that must be addressed.
Okay, yes. Between now and the 26th.
He will be engaging IBC on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Next. Ronald Mayaka, no politics, no demonstrations, and no court will solve the current conundrum in Kenya. Only Uhuru and Raila sitting down will. You guys agree?
And the court now.
Willis is insisting we have some discussion, some talks. Is it those two?
And I think there's a place for that. I think there's a place for not just Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. I think there's a place for the various leaders in this country to keep talking. The sort of intransigence we saw even last time, where even the speakers of the two houses couldn't sit together, is unfortunate. What we must not do is hold hostage constitutional processes to I don't want to say anti-constitutional, but extra-constitutional processes. We must not hold constitutional processes.
Let me say this. The The ultimate, the grundnorm of the constitution are the people of Kenya. And those people have their representatives. And the sovereign rights of the people can be exercised in very different ways. One is directly or through democratically elected representatives. So that if we say that you have a form of a discussion by the sovereigns, they can use their sovereign spokesmen to have that conversation on their behalf. At an appropriate time, I can elucidate more on what the concept of sovereign spokesperson works.
I think that's accepted.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Okay, next. Willis Akwale, you say lawyers gave us a confused constitution. Way out is political.
I think Kenyans like to blame something. You know, people talk about this constitution as if before it came, we are a lovely country, we had no problems, and look what the constitution has done to us. Do people remember that before this constitution, we attacked each other with pangas? This constitution, at least today, we're having a conversation about ideas. We're disagreeing on issues and principles. There will be issues of demonstrations, and even those demonstrations are within a constitutional framework. So I think that the answer is not to say, oh, this constitution is a problem. We ourselves as a people are a problem. And I think we need to look at ourselves and recognize that resolving is not another constitution, another meeting. We need to look deep, starting with our leaders, deep into ourselves, because the problem is not here. The problem is largely us.
The constitution is not bad. We're just putting it to test, because we are in situations where we have never been before. So we're just looking back at it and asking it, what do you want us to do in this situation? It doesn't mean that it's bad. We only have divergent views over, you know, what a particular provision means, and that's it. I mean, with time, courts, like they are doing through, if we respect, you know, courts, they will, you know, set, you know, the pace going, and we'll know what are we supposed to do under the constitution in respect to
what is that, 100 years from now?
No, we are doing well.
Let me say
we are doing well.
The crisis we are facing today is worse than the crisis that we faced in 2007.
Why do you say that?
I say that because these questions which we are now in a civil manner conversing over, in 2007 we carried machetes and guns fighting each other on the streets. That to me is a celebration of our constitution. It has enabled us to have, even though Kamodo still feel our institutions are not strong enough, to have strong institutions to the extent that that's one of the strong institutions, the Supreme Court of Kenya, was able to do what no other court had ever done in Africa or the Commonwealth. We have an opportunity to peacefully demonstrate and then even demand of the police that we now need protection when we are doing this. We are able to sit and we are discussing these things. But if it were in the previous dispensations, the crisis we'll be facing today will be far much worse in terms of human
But there are some
loss
people
of human
who
life.
ask me, is it going to get violent?
No, the fact, look, listen, we did the election. You may even think we voted last week. We actually voted in August. We are in October. It's almost over 2 months since we voted. But the country is yet to degenerate to the level of violence that we witnessed in 2007. Because of the resilience of our constitution and those what I call very innovative provisions, which are now moving the country forward in this discussion.
Okay, Monica, do you have any more? Text, okay? JT, if Ukuru Aukot also withdraws, what is the fate of the election in this country? Secondly, are NASA planning to have a new flag bearer if fresh elections are called? Good questions both. Elias.
On the first one,
yes.
Ukuru Aukot is not planning to withdraw. We would not have gone to court just for him to say, I'm in the ballot now, I'm going to withdraw. I mean, he's a sober mind, he knows what he's doing. All he says is that let me engage, because I have not had the opportunity that my friends have had with IBC. Let me have my day with IBC. We iron the issues out and we're good to go for the elections.
Willis, last question about NASA. If there's fresh elections, would they plan to hold or get a new
NASA coalition as a coalition agreement that helps the coalition in determining a fresh, in determining its presidential candidates. As it is now, all we are demanding is that we want, as per the decision of the Supreme Court of Kenya, fresh nominations to be opened up. NASA has its coalition agreement. They will come up with a flag bearer.
Okay. Monica. Mwamburi, you say, I don't think we would be where we are if the IBC would have honored the Supreme Court order to open the service.
I think that's a conversation that is not useful because the court has already made a determination on the question of the elections. What we should be looking forward to is the elections coming on 26, in which IBC, in one of its concessions, and I don't think it was a gratuitous concession. They said that NASA and all the other candidates will be allowed real-time access to the servers. So so that's an issue in the past. I think it's contested as to whether that order was obeyed. It's not useful at this point, but I think going forward, it's important that all parties have access to all the critical areas.
If those servers were open, Raila Odinga will have been declared president-elect.
That is not politics. This is law. These are lawyers.
Monica, we done? Okay, this one. Okay. And if a competent court can rule that IEBC violated our court's rights, then they committed an offense and are not competent to run an election.
Those are two different things, honestly. I mean, the issue before the court was whether IBC violated by failing to include him in the ballot. Right. It doesn't mean that they are, I mean, you can violate someone's right either intentionally or even innocently, because they said that we honestly believe that the Raila 2013 case applied in this scenario. And Mativo, you know,
and Willis agrees with them.
If that be the case, if that be the case, if it applies then it means that as at today morning, it was still the law then that law must be followed.
No,
before the judgment.
Willis, let's not confuse the people.
That law should be followed.
Let's not confuse.
Why are we very good political because I've said in those servers, Raila Odinga is the winner of the election.
In the servers?
If they're open.
That's all right.
Okay, last Facebook post. Stano, you say election on date 26 with all 8 candidates. Period.
That's what the court said.
Wishful thinking.
No. These people don't respect the courts at all. Unless the courts are consistent with their views.
It is the same court. Yes. It is the same court which allowed us to withdraw.
By the way, let me tell you.
And we've withdrawn in accordance with the decision of the Supreme Court of Kenya.
If the High Court had made a pro NASA decision this morning, the positions being articulated would be fundamentally different, and that's the truth. So yeah, it's true.
All right, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation. Very confusing for me, but you know, it's okay. I'm learning. I could be a student of law one of these days.
We'll send you a fee note.
Yes. Final thoughts. We cannot go without some final thoughts, gentlemen. Going forward with 14 days and 14 nights to go before the election, whether it happens or not, on behalf of Willis, you know, you tell us or not. Let's have your final thoughts going forward. That's your camera over there.
The point is very simple. As the NASA coalition has said, the environment that we have right now, you cannot have what can qualify to be a free, fair, and credible elections. IBC is Jubilee, and Jubilee is IBC, and that can be seen. Whatever Jubilee tweets in the day, IBC announces in the evening as its position on any questions of law or any question of organizing for elections. So my take of it is that we must start a genuine conversation as a people on how we can develop and have a level playing field that can facilitate a free and fair elections, in which the loser of that process will be able to shake the hands of the winner of that process, and we will move forward as a nation, as one.
Okay. So for you guys, no election 26th?
There'll be no elections on the 26th.
Elias, that camera there.
Thank you very much. One, we have been given a new chance by the High Court and by the Supreme Court by including a Equal Court in the ballot. We do not need, you know, to stick to, you know, the two rivals that have caused all these problems to us. We have this chance. Why can't we just, you know, grab it and run with it? Let's end this right now by, you know, avoiding this tribal and merchants so that we can move forward. Let's give Ekuru a chance.
Do you honestly think your guy can win?
I think Kenyans are tired, honestly, by Jubilee and NASA because they are not genuine. That's very clear. They have their own agendas, their ulterior motives. Why can't we just give Ekuru a chance? We end this. It's our chance.
Kamado, you get the final word. That camera there.
The people of Kenya must come to terms with the fact that they passed a constitution and that their continued sustainability as a nation is going to depend on the extent to which they are willing to be bound by this constitution. This constitution includes institutions. Those institutions are not going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. Our responsibility is not to destroy them or to put them aside, to put the law aside, but to say, let us continue to grow. Let us continue to build on the successes we have had. That is what will make us a sustainable democracy. Anything that goes extra the constitution, however exciting it may be, however, you know, it may resolve our immediate problem, is not a sustainable solution to the democracy called Kenya. So Kenyans must respect the constitution, must abide by it, and most importantly, these institutions that we are building are very brittle. They're still very delicate. If we destroy them, Jeff, we have nowhere else to go. Yeah. So let us support them even when they are not perfect. Within limits, if the commission is able within limits to provide for us an election that is in accordance with the law, let us go to the election. If there are challenges, there are still institutions to resolve that challenge.
No doubt about it. Thanks so much. Kamatha Waiganjo, Elias Mutuma, Willis Otieno, thanks so much, guys. A great conversation, very important, and I think you've shed some light on a lot of things that was confusing a lot of people. And as I always keep saying, we've got to keep talking. Because the moment we stop talking is the moment we start fighting, and we don't want to go down that slippery slope. That is the bottom line. And remember, if it's Wednesday, it's all about those 3 letters on the keyboard, JKL, that follow each other. And JKL, sponsored by Telkom Kenya. Telkom, moving with you. Thanks so much again, gentlemen. Thank you all for watching. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya. Hashtag, as always, is JK Live. As always, thanks so much for joining us. Good night. Good luck. God bless. Tomorrow morning on Hot 96, Jeff Jalas and myself, we're honoring our fallen heroes. So please tune in between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. on 96 FM. And another thing I need to remind you, Citizen Television Royal Media Services is starting a new network, a new channel. We call it View Sasa. View Sasa is now here for exciting movies, music, soaps, and dramas. Download today and start that entertainment journey right here on Royal Media Services. JKL, moving with you thanks to Telkom. Gentlemen, thanks again.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. All the best.
Asante.
Asante Pia.